How does Harry Potter go down a hill? Walking? JK, rolling. All right, we're going to... I know it's bad. Where does a horse live? In a neighborhood? I know. Oh, no, that's a bad one.
The difference between a good joke and a bad joke is timing.
Timing. It's all timing. Or the punchline. All right. We're going to discuss something that seems like it's not that relevant to your salvation. But from the evolutionary standpoint, it is the gateway belief that brings in an acceptance of atheistic and evolutionary teaching. And here's what I mean by that. When they did a survey of, do you believe in evolution? Do you believe in creation? They did a survey, and they said the way to get somebody to believe in evolution is that they have to first believe in millions and millions of years of Earth history. If they don't believe in millions of years of Earth history, then they'll never believe in evolution. But if you could get them to believe in millions of years of Earth history, then you could have a much, much better chance of teaching them evolution and then ultimately atheistic evolution. And so the reason that we deal with age of the earth, lots of times we catch a lot of flack from people who say, look, age of the earth is not relevant. You can be a creationist and it doesn't matter how old you think the earth is. Okay, yeah, you can be a creationist and believe in old earth. But you can't consistently use the same type of reasoning that you use in other places in the Bible and be a creationist and believe in an old earth. You have to change the way you interpret the Bible to get millions of years. Because if you use that same type of interpretation in the New Testament, you would not believe that baptism is essential for salvation. You would not believe that a cappella singing is the mandated, authorized singing for the New Testament. It's an entirely different way to interpret Scripture, and frankly, it's incorrect. It's not a correct way to interpret Scripture. And so, I'm going to give you just a couple of these. Earth has been changed. Of course, this is just first grade. I'm just giving you a sample of where your kids are going to be running into this information. Earth has changed so much in its formation 4.5 billion years ago. Now, here's what's interesting. From the time of Charles Darwin, they suggest it might be 200 to 400 million years old. On average, the age of the Earth and universe has doubled every 40 years. And at every given point, the scientific community has said, we've got something that proves this age. So, work with me. In Charles Darwin's day, let's say they said it was 400 million years old, and you said, well, how do you know that? Well, we've got these dating methods that prove that. Well, then it doubles to 800 million. Well, how do you know that? Well, we've got these dating methods that prove that. And then 40 years later, well, how old is it now? Well, now it's 1.6 billion. Well, how do you know that? Well, we've got these dating methods that prove that. And so now we're told the entire universe supposedly is 13.82 billion years old. Now, it's interesting. They were saying 13.7 billion. And then they came out in a paragraph in one scholarly article somewhere, and they said, oh, we're wrong about that. We actually needed to add 120 million years to that. It's now 13.82 billion, and we know this for a fact. Well, they knew 13.7 for a fact. And they knew 6.5 for a fact, and they knew 2.3 for a fact. And along the way, every time they've said, now these dating methods prove what we're saying. Okay, when they said 200 million, did those dating methods prove that? Well, when they said 400 million, did they prove that? When they said 1.2 billion, did they prove that? I mean, so why is it now we should say, oh, you've got dating methods, you say prove this old Earth, and now yours must be right. Well, you can see the challenges with that, but what I'm showing you is that this is from the earliest writings that your kids will see on any of these subjects. You will get this second grade, since its formation 4.5 billion years ago. Now that's 4,500 million years ago. It's a massive amount of time. As you start looking at this, here's what Richard Dawkins says. He says, it's absolutely safe to say that if you meet somebody who does not believe in evolution, that person is ignorant, stupid, or insane, or wicked, but I'd rather not consider that last one. Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, and so basically you're looking at this, okay, that is intellectual bullying at its finest. Okay, we are Dawkins supposed to believe in science and believe in the scientific method and make sure that he's looking for truth, etc. And then says, well, hold on a second. If you don't believe what I believe, you're stupid, ignorant, insane, or wicked. But I'd rather not consider that last. Now, I put this up here to help us maybe with a little of the mindset of why a lot of people want to hold on to creation, but they also kind of want to hold on to evolution and the millions of years. I mean, why would they do that? Well, you go to let's say you teach at a university, and 85% of the people at the university believe that the earth is millions and millions of years old, and you want to be able to say, yeah, I fit in with you. But then when you go to church, and they say God created the world, you want to be able to say, well, yeah, I fit in with you too. And so the way to do that is just take the millions of years in evolution and take the story of creation and say, well, I just believe in both of them. I believe that, yeah, creation is true, but God used evolution to do it. Or something like that. And it's really just a compromise. It's I want to go in both places and fit in both places. Now, the irony of it is that the scientists who put forth this millions of years, if you say, hey, I believe in millions of years, but I also believe in creation, well, you don't fit in with them either. Because they will quickly say, and they'll point out, and you can read from their writings, that's very inconsistent teaching, because Genesis and the Bible don't allow for that. In fact, some of the best critiques of these types of compromises, guess where they come from? From the atheistic evolutionary community, because they say, oh, hold on just a second. You're trying to be an evolutionist, but you're then saying that there's a God and the Bible is still right, and that can't be right because of this. One of the best writings I've ever seen on debunking this idea of holding on to both is in a book called Atheist Universe by David Mills, and he writes a chapter on people who try to compromise the creation account with millions of years and demolishes it. Well, because they can see the inconsistencies of it, and so you don't really fit in with them, and you don't really fit in with the Bible, and so you're really just kind of stuck out there. But now, let's continue. There are 100 scientific ways to date the earth, and at least 50 of them give you ages in thousands of years. Now, you never hear about those. But you hear all about the dating methods that give you millions or billions of years. You don't ever hear about the ones like the Earth's decaying magnetic field. Now, if you use the same assumptions for the dating methods that they use for radiometric dating, and we'll get into some of it hopefully. Same assumptions. Stuff has been happening the same way in the past at the same rate. Well, if you use that for the decaying magnetic field of the Earth, you get right at 6,000 to 7,000 years. How come that is not in your textbook? Well, it doesn't give you millions of years. And so that dating method gets thrown out, along with the other 50. That, if you use the same assumptions that are used for the millions of years dating, well, they would give you sometimes hundreds. I mean, sometimes you use the same assumptions on some of these dating methods. They say the Earth is 200 years old. Oh, you know that's not right. So you get rid of that. But these assumptions that these dating methods are based on, you just simply don't know the things that go into the assumptions, and you can't grant, okay, we're going to assume things have always happened the way that they happen now. Or in this particular thing, nothing's touched it for the last 6,000 years or 6 billion years, etc. And I'll get into those if we've got time. But here is what we find at AP to be the most common attempt to fit time into the Bible, because that's what you've got to do. You know, to get these millions of years, you've got to find somewhere to put it in the biblical text. But now here's the challenge. This word, this day-age theory, here's the day-age theory. You guys could probably tell me what this is. I'll just give you the quick definition of it. It's where someone suggests that you can take the millions of years of time and fit them in the creation account. And basically they say, hey, couldn't those days have been long extended periods of millions of years instead of literal 24 hours? You know, at first it sounds, okay, could God have created the world in 6 billion years if he wanted to? Sure. Could he have done it in 6 seconds if he wanted to? Sure. I mean, what would limit God from doing it any way he wanted? It's not like it's harder for him to do it in 6 seconds than it is 6 billion years. It doesn't take him more energy. He could do it any amount of time he wanted to do it. And so some people say, well, maybe if we're going to fit this creation idea and this evolution idea, well, let's say those days are millions and millions of years, and let's say that's how God did it. Now, you're going to run into two problems with that. First problem is the sequence of events in creation from Genesis does not match the alleged sequence of events in the evolutionary Big Bang scenario. Because someone will say, well, hey, God could have started with a Big Bang there in Genesis 1, and all of that could have just played out just like the Big Bang scenario. Well, the problem with that is, number one, the sequence is wrong. When did God create the earth? Very first day. When did He create the sun? Day 4. And the stars? Day 4. Well, according to your Big Bang, the sun and stars had to come before any planets, because the suggestion is the big explosion caused all this stuff to go out in the universe, and then the stars formed, and planets started coalescing out of space dust around those stars. So the sequence is wrong. And then when you start looking at the flowering plants that were created on day 3, well, according to the evolutionary scenario, lots of those flowering plants would not have come into being until long after the animals would have come on. And the animals were in day 5 and day 6, and those flowering plants created on day 3, they, according to the evolutionary scenario, should have come way after lots of those animals. So the sequence does not work. You can't say, well, God used evolution to do it, because the evolutionary sequence that you're given in most any textbook doesn't match at all what Genesis says. And secondly, you've got to get those millions of years into the days, and I'm going to show you that doesn't work either. When you read the Genesis account, and God creates light, separates from darkness, evening and morning, day 1. Okay? The words evening and the morning are used together in the Old Testament with the word day 100 times in non-prophetical literature. Every single time it refers to a literal 24-hour day. Now, the word day can have a lot of meanings. Back in my day, we walked to school uphill both ways in the snow. Okay, now what do you mean back in my day? Does that mean back in my 24-hour period? No, it's some unidentified time in the past. The day of the Lord is going to come as a thief in the night. What does that mean? 24-hour period? No, that means a time in the future that you don't know how much it is. This is the day in which God created something. Well, lots of times that word day just means an unidentified time. Sometimes it even means 12 hours. I must work while it is day. Night comes when nobody can work. What's it mean there? 12 hours. How can you ever know the definition of any word? There's only one way. Context. What does the word bear mean? B-E-A-R. Okay, the man says to bear arms. Well, okay, let me give you a story. There's a guy. He's walking with me. His name is Dave Miller. Some of you might know him. And we're out in the woods. And I'm wearing dress shoes, and so is he. We've just got done preaching, and we see a big grizzly bear. This big grizzly bear starts chasing us. I sit down, change my dress shoes into tennis shoes. And he says, Kyle, you can't outrun that bear. And I say, no, Dave, I don't have to. I just have to outrun you. And I take off. Okay, now, what does the word bear in that context mean? To bear arms? To carry something? No. Now, it's spelled B-E-A-R. Exactly like to bear arms, but the only way you can know what that word means is from the context. Now, the emotional struggles were too hard for him to bear. The load of bricks was too heavy for him to bear. You got different meanings, and you have to have the context. You cannot define a word outside of context. Wait. What does that mean? Well, how you spell it, number 1, W-E-I-G-H-T or W-A-I-T. And then when you spell it one of those two ways, wait, you then have to have the context to tell you what it means. All right, in this context, here's what the text is telling you. You've got the word yom, so you want to know what this means. Evening and morning are used with this word 100 times. In non-prophetic literature like Genesis, it's historic narrative. Every single time in the entire Old Testament, it always means a 24-hour period. Here's what that's saying. To get it to mean something other than a 24-hour period, you have to invent an unknown and never seen before Hebrew way to understand this word. Nobody's ever seen it anywhere. You would be inventing it so you could make the day mean millions of years. And then when someone were to say to you, where do you get the idea that the Hebrew word could do that? You would have to say, well, I've never seen it happen, but it's got to in this case so that we can get millions of years. You see the problem with that? All right, so I've seen it 100 times in the Old Testament, 99 times. 98, 97, however many times it's outside of Genesis. It always means a literal 24-hour period. What does it then mean in Genesis? And let me suggest to you this. I believe true. The writer of the Old Testament used every single contextual clue he had at his disposal to show you these were literal 24-hour days. Every one. So number one, evening and morning. It's giving you a context of time, an evening and a morning. Now, you get to day 3, and if these evenings and mornings are long extended periods of millions or billions of years, God creates flowers and plants on day 3. There's an evening and a morning. If that evening is a long period of darkness for 500 million years, what's it do to every plant that God made on day 3? Kills them all. Well, if it's 24 hours, no problem whatsoever. So you're going to even have a problem if you're going to say this is evening and morning, and that evening is a long extended period of millions of years, and that morning is a long, well, then that darkness is going to be a problem on day 3. Well, continue with it. We have failed to find a single example of the use of the word day in the entire Scripture. Nowhere. When it means something other than 24 hours when modified by a numeric adjective. An evening and a morning, day 1. Evening and morning, day 2. Evening and morning, day 3. Evening and morning, day 4, day 5, day 6. Now, think about this. Think about how we use the word day. Back in my day, could be undefined. The second day I was at school. Now, is that undefined? No, you're real clear about that. Because it's giving you a numeric adjective that modifies day to say a specific one. And so, when you look in Genesis, number one, evening or morning, never found a Hebrew usage in the whole Bible where that would be anything other than a 24-hour day. Secondly, it's modified by a numeric adjective. Never found a single example where a numeric adjective modifies the word day and it's anything other than literal 24 hours. So here's what I'm saying. If it was just evening or morning, you could stop it right there and say, okay, they'd have to make up a new Hebrew whole construct to get this. But then it's got a numeric adjective, and then you would say, no, they don't have to make up one new Hebrew construct. They got to make up 2 brand new Hebrew constructs that nobody's ever seen in the history of Bible writing to get this to mean anything other than a literal 24-hour day. Okay? Now, keep going. Plural of the word day. The word day, yom, appears in its plural form, yamim, 700 times. It always means a literal 24-hour period when it is in non-prophetic literature like Genesis or Exodus. Do you remember the word yamim ever written in Exodus? For in 6, numeric adjective, days, plural, yamim, the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. That is 700 times. In non-prophetic literature, like Genesis and Exodus, it always means a literal 24-hour day every single time. Read it right there. Now, when you go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, God says, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs and seasons, for days, plural, and years. Well, if the word days means long extended periods of millions and millions of years, what does the word year mean in this instance? Who has any idea? We're going to have to make up something else to figure out what year means here, because days makes perfect sense if you understand it to be a literal 24-hour period, just like it is in every single other instance of the 700 times it's mentioned in the Bible in non-prophetic literature. But you're going to have to change all of that if you want that to be long extended periods of millions of years. Now, some people say, well, hold on, Kyle. Wait a second. What about 2 Peter 3:8? For the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day. Doesn't that mean that time doesn't matter to God? Well, in one sense, yes. It absolutely means time doesn't matter to God. And what's he saying in 2 Peter? You know, this is the context of the second coming of Jesus. And some people are saying Jesus isn't coming back. When you look at the front of that chapter, for scoffers will come in the last days, and they'll say, where's the promise of his coming? For all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. But this they willfully forget, and then he goes into the story about the flood. They forget that God created the world, and then he flooded the world. And then he says, but the Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some count slackness, but is long-suffering, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. For with the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as a day. What happens when you make a promise? You know, my kids will come up to me and they'll be like, Dad, you owe me $50. I'm like, what? Oh, you $50? Are you kidding me? He's like, yeah, you remember 3.5 years ago you said that if this happened, then I would give $50. And I'm like, no. Now, I paid you that $50. You never did pay me that. You still owe it to me. I'm like, Reed, I do not owe you $50. Okay, when I make a promise, sometimes I forget. I might have said, I'll give you $5. And I forget it. My kid didn't. He comes back to me and says, you owe me $5. You said you give it to me. And I forgot. Now, something that determines from a human standpoint, lots of times, whether you fulfill a promise or not, is how long it elapses from when you said it to when you fulfill it. What's God trying to say with the second coming of Jesus? You know, it's been a while, and he hadn't come yet. That doesn't mean he's not coming. Because with the Lord, if he makes the promise yesterday, he's going to keep it. And if he makes a promise 2,000 years ago, he's going to keep it. It doesn't matter when God makes a promise, he always keeps it. Now, is he saying then that a day is the same with God as a year? No. In fact, the irony of anybody that uses this verse to try to get the days of creation to be extended periods of time, in this verse, God's trying to communicate 2 periods of time. What are they? For with the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years. What does he mean by one day? 24-hour period of time. What's he mean by 1,000 years? 1,365.24 days. It's very easy to understand when God wants to communicate a period of time, he does that. What did God do in Genesis to communicate the period of time under discussion in Genesis 1? Put evening and morning, put a numeric adjective in front of it, put it plural in Exodus, and did everything he could do contextually so that you would see these were literal 24-hour days. Now, you look at that and you say, well, hold on a second, why? Why would he do that? And I'm going to give you, I think, the absolute answer for that. God could have created the world any amount of time he wanted. 6 seconds, 6 days, 6 billion years, 600 billion years, any amount of time. He says he did it in 6 days. When you go to Exodus chapter 20, I want you all to pick up your Bibles for this one. It's very important. If you've got them in front of you, go to Exodus chapter 20. And I want you to see what the context is of this Exodus verse. Remember, we're in the Ten Commandments. Exodus chapter 20, you start there in verse, a lot of times I just remember where I'm bad with verses. I'm good with where it is on my side of my, that's on the left side of my column, and it's about right there in the middle of the page, and it starts when it is indented right there. So I don't know what verse that is, 9. We'll say it's 9. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 8. Remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. Why? For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven, the earth, and the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore you shall work. What? 6 days. And cease your working, stop working on the 7th day. Why did God say he made the world in 6 days, stopped creating on that 7th day? To give the entire world, from the dawn of creation, the period of a week as 7 days, to be the pattern that has been followed from the dawn of creation until now. Now listen to me. Let me ask you a legitimate question. Is there any natural phenomena that gives you a 7-day work week? There's no moon cycle. There's no earth spin cycle. Now, how do you get a year? It's pretty simple. You calculate that from the earth going around the sun. Takes 365.24 days for that earth to go all the way around the sun. How do you get a day? Earth's on its axis. It spins around. Takes 24 hours. How do you get a 7-day work week? There's no natural phenomena for it. Why has every culture from the dawn of human history had a 7-day work week? Now, some people have tried to change it, some cultures, and they haven't been successful, and now there's still a 7-day work week all over the world. Why is that the case? God says, I could have done it in 6 seconds, I could have done it in 6 billion years. He didn't say that. We know he could have. But he says, I did it in 6 days and rested the 7th day. Why? So that you would have a pattern for a week. Now, God tells you that. So, the children of Israel, they're listening to God through Moses, and he says, for in 6 days you need to work. What did they understand that time period to be? 6 what? Well, I'm going to work for 6 million years. And man, retirement's going to be awesome. No. For in 6 days you work, 6 literal 24-hour days. Do you think they would want to extend to that 7th day? And on the 7th, long extended, well, those 6 might have been 24 hours, but this last one, the 7th day, we're going to make it millions. No. What was the understanding? 6 literal 24-hour days you work. 7th day, you stop working, and then when do you pick up again? After that 7th 24-hour period, you pick up, you work another 6 24-hour days, you stop, 7th, easy to understand. God gave you a pattern of 7 literal 24-hour days in Genesis chapter 1 as a pattern for the work week, and there's no other explanation that anybody can give that tells you why that's been the pattern for human history. But it's very simple to see why that's the case. Now, here's the second problem you're going to have with trying to shove this stuff in the text. The idea of evolution and Big Bang scenario stuff also doesn't fit other aspects of the Bible. Now, work with me on this. If the Big Bang occurs right here in my right hand, start right there at the longest finger of my right hand, the alleged amount of time that's involved, 13.82 billion years, if it's represented by my outstretched arms, Big Bang starts here, 1 second after the Big Bang, come all the way to here. Over here is 13.82 billion years. Where do humans arrive on the scene in the Big Bang scenario? Okay, at the very tip of my middle fingernail. On this side. Here's the beginning. Here's where humans supposedly arrived 4 million years ago, according to the evolutionary scenario. Okay, according to the Bible, when are humans present in the creation scenario? Well, the Bible tells you exactly when they're present. Mark chapter 10, verse 6, from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. Okay, so according to the Big Bang, beginning of creation is here, and humans arrive over here. According to the Bible, when do humans arrive? The beginning of creation. Now, there's no way you're going to understand the beginning of creation to be the very last tip of my middle finger in this Big Bang scenario on this millions of years time frame. If you read these as literal 24-hour days, when were humans created? On day 6, the very first week of creation. That's the beginning of creation. And so you're going to have problems fitting this Big Bang idea into the text, not only because it doesn't fit time-wise, numerically, but there are other statements in the Bible, like humans being here from the beginning, that would be real problematic for. Romans chapter 1, verse 20, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are seen, being understood by the things that are made. Who's been understanding them from the beginning? Humans. So from the beginning, you've been able to understand God's invisible attributes from the stuff that you could see. Who could see? Adam and Eve, very first week of creation. So, here's then what you're looking at. We know humans have been on the earth from the beginning, first week. So can we get a reasonable age for the earth based on what the Bible says and what we know? I'm going to tell you to the day exactly how old the earth is right now. I'm serious. No joke. The earth is exactly, to the day, 5 days older than humans. I'm dropping. I mean, that's it. No, okay, I'm joking. 5 days older than humans. So here's all we got to do. Here's really all you got to do. If you know humans are here from the beginning of creation, and you know the creation is 5 days older than humans, then if you can find out how long humans have been on the earth, then add 5 days to that and you've got it. Now, can we? The fact of the matter is, we kind of can. All right, let's think about this. Us to Jesus, how long? Everybody knows this. It's approximately 2,000 years. We'll go 2018, although the time there is a little wonky because the calendar got done by, what was the guy's name? Some Gregory the Lesser, who didn't really probably calculate exactly right, and Jesus was probably born about 4 BC or so and not 0 where they put him. But anyway, we're going to say right at 2,000, right? Now, next question. From Jesus to Abraham, secular records and everything, what do they give you? About 2,000. I mean, we know for sure back to David was right at about 1,000. From David back to Abraham, right at about 1,000. So you're looking at from us to Jesus, 2,000. From Jesus to Abraham, 2,000. Okay, so now all we got to get from Abraham to Adam. And that will give us literally a round figure of the age of the earth. So we've got 2,000 us to Jesus, 2,000 from Jesus to Abraham. From Abraham to Adam, how long? Well, when you start doing the calculations, you can do this. I would encourage you to do it. But, seriously, right? I mean, I'm about to get to the punch line here. No, I'm stretching. I know I've got some battery, though. I know that. See, that thing is still very shiny. Uh-oh, Tony's on him. He's asleep, did you say? What? It looks like I got battery. Is that doing it? I'm pointing in the right direction and everything. You know what he says, which is so true. And if you guys have been watching, I historically want to point it at the screen. You know, what good's that going to do? That's not where the thing is back there. So he said, look, when you hit the button, make sure you point it back at this because the screen is not going to help you. All right. That thing right there, it's not helping me. I think it froze up on me. Hold on, wait for it. Let me see if this will do it. All right. You know what? Forget that. Let me just tell you. If you were to go to Genesis chapter 5, Genesis chapter 10, and you were to start adding up the dates that it gives you for when the son was born to the dad. Adam was 130 years, and he begot, and it'll tell you his son. And his son was this old, and he begot, and it'll tell you his son. And his son. So here's what you do. Adam was 130 years, and he begot his son there. So you put 130 years. All right, then when his son had his son, I think it's 90 in that first second. So then you put 90. And then you go all the way down to Abraham. And guess what you get? Out of about 22 generations from Adam to Abraham, you get right at 2,000 years. Now here's what's interesting. From Abraham to Jesus, it's 55 generations. And still 2,000 years. So what's the difference? Oh, they were living longer? And Adam was 130 years old when he had his son, etc. And so the genealogies that give you from Adam to Abraham, from Abraham to Jesus, from Jesus to us, well, of course we don't have genealogies for that. But that really, oh yeah, all right. No, it's not happening. It is not happening, bro. Anyway, that's all I'm really going to say. I mean, it's just got a little slide that says what I just told you. Gives you right at 2,000 years. So really, anytime. Now, here's the thing. Here's why I say approximately 2,000 years. Because when you start looking at those, there will be a statement, and it'll say Terah was 75 years old when he had his sons, Abraham, Nahor, and what was his other son? Abraham, Nahor, and something. Anybody? No. Okay, anyway. Now, when you start looking at that, 75 years old when he had his sons, Abraham, it lists all three of them. Well, what you find out that means is he started having his sons when he was 75, and Abraham was, whichever one was born first, and then it looks like 3 years later the next one was, and we don't know how many years later the next one was. So when it says he was 75 years old, and a lot of times when it mentions several people after that, he was 75 years old and he had his sons, and it'll name them all, then sometimes it'll be he actually had that one son at 78. So if you put 75 there, and you meant Abraham, and then it says Abraham was so-and-so, well, you really needed 3 more years there. And so you go for approximately 6,000 to 7,000 years. There you go. Finally, we got it right there in red for you, 20 generations. So that really is, it's really that simple. It seems like, well, hold on, Kyle, how can you do that? You can't really just get 3 sections of about 2,000 years and say, well, yeah. I mean, if humans have been on the earth since creation, you know exactly how long it is approximately from us to Jesus. You know from Jesus to Abraham. All you got to do is get from Abraham back to Adam. Now, some people they'll say this, well, hold on a second. Couldn't Adam have been in the garden for millions of years before he was kicked out? The problem with that is, when did days and years start being counted, according to Genesis 1? Well, yes, and for sure you then know on day 4, because when the sun, moon, and stars were created. These are for times and seasons, for days and years. Yeah, it was literal 24 hours from the very beginning. But then if anybody questions that, well, you got 4 right there that you know for sure the days were starting. And so there's no possible way he could have been in the garden for anything other than 930 years, because it says, and all the days of Adam that he lived were 900 and, I think Adam was 930. Was Adam 930? Yeah, I think so. Shows my retention of minor details of the Old Testament not very good, because I didn't know Abraham's other brother. But anyway, so he couldn't have been in the garden any longer than 930 years. And that's, if Adam's first, and you know that he lived for a total of 930 years, all you could possibly have is he was in the garden for 930 years, which he sinned sometime way before that, looks like, if you're reading the text in any straightforward manner. And so there you go. That's it. Now, as you look at that, some people will say, well, hey, couldn't God have put a big block of time between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2? It's called the gap theory. And they make up this big idea about how the word bara and asa mean different things, and one of them means God created from scratch, and the other means he reformed it out of something already made. Well, the problem with that is those words are used interchangeably. And they will say, well, this word means he created out of something already made, but we can then find several examples where it shows, no, he actually used this word to show that he created something from scratch there. And so they can't bear the weight of that either. Now, here's my next question. I always ask this. But why would you want millions of years? Why are you trying to get billions of years? Well, just because our modern ideas have said there are billions of years, and people have adopted that and tried to shove them in. Now, I think that's all the time I will spend on this. And I said we'll get to some questions. Oh, yeah. Oh, there you can do it for you. Adam, 130 years. Seth, 105. And there's your... All right. So we'll stop right there. And then I'm going to give you the quickest run-through you've ever heard. The quickest 5-minute run-through of the radiometric dating methods that supposedly prove how old the Earth is. Because lots of times someone will say, well, what about carbon dating? Doesn't that prove that the Earth is millions of years old? Well, number one, carbon dating has never been used to prove millions of years. The most it could ever do, even the inventor of it says 40 to 50,000 years. Now, stop right there. We've just said, hold on, there's only about 6,000 years available. Not only the most it could ever do is 40 to 50,000 years, but it's not right even lots of times with 1,000, 2,000, 500 years. Lots of times, like they've dated a musk ox, I think it was a musk ox muscle fiber that dated to the muscle fiber on the back of its rear end. The muscle fiber dated to like 7,000 years ago, and 14,000 years ago, and then they dated a hair from the same musk ox, and it dated to 7,000. So what you got? A musk ox that has run around on the earth for 7,000 years without hair. And then it grows some hair. See, you got challenges. Now, and I say that because every single dating method, every one, is based on at least 3 assumptions, some of them even more, that you can't grant anybody because you don't know them. Now, like I said, I'm going to give you the rundown on this. The ones that supposedly give us billions of years. Here's what they say. All right. There's a parent element and a daughter element. Stick with it. It's going to be the fastest run-through you've ever heard. But it's really interesting if you stay with it. The parent element is the radioactive element that breaks down into something else. One of them is uranium-238 into lead. Okay, so you start out with 100 ounces of uranium. Now, if you let uranium sit somewhere for 4.5 billion years, that's called its half-life, then you are now going to have 50 ounces of uranium and 50 ounces of lead. If you let it sit for another 4.5 billion years, supposedly, you're now going to have half of this, so 25 ounces of uranium, 75 ounces of lead, etc. All right, it's pretty easy to understand. Now, you come upon a rock, and now this only works with igneous rocks, rocks that have been formed in volcanoes and fire. You come upon a rock, it's got 50 ounces of uranium, 50 ounces of lead. How old is it? Now, that's a trick question. Okay, number one, you've got to assume no daughter element was in it to start with. If you're going to date this thing, and you find 50 ounces of uranium, 50 ounces of lead, you're going to assume there was no lead in it, so this is 4.5 billion years old. Okay, could there have been some daughter element to begin with? Yeah, and here's the problem. You go to somebody's swimming pool, you see that they're dumping in water at 100 gallons an hour. You measure how many gallons of water are in the pool, and there's 3,000 gallons. How long have they been running the hose? You don't know, because you don't know how much water was in it to start with. If you say, well, this is a 3,000-gallon pool, there is 3,000 gallons in it, it's coming in at a rate of 100 gallons an hour, so how many hours has it been running? 30 hours. You knock on the door, you say, I see you've been running your hose 30 hours. Well, no, we haven't been running our hose 30 hours. It rained big last night, and it filled it up 2,800 gallons. We've just been running for 2 hours to put the extra 2 gallons in. You assumed that there was none in it to start with. When you assume there's none in it to start with, could you be wrong? Okay, yeah. All right, now, you come up on a sample, and 50 ounces of uranium, 50 ounces of lead, you got to assume nothing's touched it for 4.5 billion years. Okay? Could some water have run into the sample and added some lead? Sure. Could it have taken away some uranium? Sure. You have to assume nothing has touched the sample for 4.5 billion years. There's no possible way anybody can know what has happened in 4.5 billion years. No way you could assume that nothing's touched it. No water's come in, no other element, no other radioactive stuff's been going on. Third assumption. Now, I say lots of them, they're based on more assumptions than these three. Third assumption, the same rate has been going on of decay for as long as this element has been around. Same rate of decay. Now, here's the problem. You see a guy, he's chopping wood. He chops down 1 log an hour. He's got 25 logs on the ground. How long has he been chopping? How long? An hour for every log, right? Because you watched him. He chopped 1 log down in 1 hour. There's 25 logs on the ground. How long has he been chopping? 25 hours. So you go up and talk to him. You say, wow, so you've been working 25 hours? He said, what are you talking about? You said, well, it took you 1 hour to chop that log. He says, well, my quota is 25. He said, when I was full and my axe was sharp this morning, I was chopping down 4 or 5 logs an hour. I just chopped this last one kind of casually, chopped it down at 1 log an hour. I just needed to meet my quota at 25. That's why you see 25 logs there, and I've really only been working for about 7 hours. Well, no, you assume that the rate was the same. When you assume that the rate is the same, sometimes you can be off very, very badly. Now, you have to assume that the rate has all... If there was a global flood, could that affect the rate of the way things happen? If the environment was considerably different before the flood, could that have affected the rate of the way things happen, et cetera? Yeah. So these dating methods are all based on assumptions that if you grant them, okay, yeah, that's right. Now, here's the problem. You take uranium-238 breaks down into lead, and then you take the same rock and you use potassium-argon dating on it, same principles, but the uranium to lead will give you 300 million years. The potassium to argon will give you 1 million years, and it's the exact same rock with the exact same assumptions. And so guess which one they pick out of that? They date it with their argon-potassium, date uranium-lead. Guess which one they pick? Or the big one, or whichever one matches what they think it should be. In fact, if you were going to try to date a rock, I would not give you any pointers on that. Just kidding. If you were going to try to date one and you went to a place that actually would do that for you, they give you a questionnaire and they say, where did you find it? How old do you think it is? Why do they ask you where you found it and how old you think it is? Because if they just date it and give you back a date, and they give you a date of 100,000 years, and you found it in Cretaceous that's supposed to be 170 million years old, what are they going to look like if they gave you that date? So they won't even date it most of the time unless you tell them where you found it and exactly how old you think it's supposed to be. And let me see if there's anything else on that. Oh, yeah. One more thing, and I'll end it. Lots of times we know exactly what the date of the rock is. It'll be igneous rock that was formed in a volcano that we know was formed 200 years ago from a volcanic eruption on an island in Hawaii. We know exactly how old the rock is. It's 200 years old. They'll do the dating methods, and they'll give you 900 million years or 90 million years. Or they'll do 5 of them, and one of them will give you 1 million years, one of them will give you 90 million years, the other one will give you 350 million years. We know the rock is only 200 years old. Here's what happens. In most instances, where we know the age of the rock, it's 200, 300, 400 years, we know it. The dating methods will be terribly, terribly wrong. And they'll say, yeah, I mean, it's wrong when we know the right age, but when we don't, it's right. All right, I'm going to leave you with that. I think that's our time. Oh, he says, no, we got 40 more minutes. Okay. So does anybody? No, I'm just kidding. All right, that's it.